Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment when your absence becomes louder than your presence ever was. When the person who once took you for granted suddenly realizes they can't breathe the same without you. They scroll through old messages just to feel close to what they destroyed. They replay every word, every silence, every goodbye, because now they understand what they lost wasn't just a person. It was peace, it was love, it was you. And by the time they finally see your worth, you've already learned how to live without them. And there comes a moment when the silence you leave behind speaks louder than any words ever could. When your absence becomes the echo in every room they walk into. You see, people often don't realize your value when you're standing right in front of them, loving them, showing up for them, choosing them every single day. It's not because they're incapable of feeling. It's because they take comfort in the idea that you'll always be there. They confuse your consistency for permanence, your patience for endless tolerance. But when you finally walk away, that's when the truth starts to haunt them. And at first they'll pretend it doesn't matter. They'll tell themselves you were too much, too emotional, too demanding, too intense. They'll replay the moments where you expressed your feelings and use them as proof that you were the problem. But deep down, underneath the noise of their ego, something shifts. They notice the quiet. They feel the absence of your energy, the way you used to light up their world without even realizing it. And suddenly, the things they took for granted start to ache. The good morning texts that no longer arrive, the laughter that used to fill the air, the gentle reassurance you gave when their world was crumbling, gone. And they start to check your social media, not to reconnect, but to see if you've moved on. They want told. Oh no, if you're happy without them, because some part of them believed you never could be. They thought they had time. They thought you'd always be there waiting, orbiting around their indecision. But the moment they see you standing strong on your own, something in them cracks. They start to realize that your love wasn't a given, it was a gift. And they let it slip through their fingers. And you see, when you leave, they begin to feel the weight of every moment they dismissed, every text they ignored, every time they chose pride over vulnerability, every time they shut down when you needed them most. It all comes back. The irony is that they remember the moments that hurt you most, because those were the moments when you needed them and they weren't there. Now they need you and you're gone. That's when the pain becomes real, and they'll think about how easily you forgave, how you stayed when things got hard, how you believed in the best version of them even when they didn't see it themselves. They'll remember how your presence grounded them, how your love softened their edges, how your laughter made their worst days bearable. They'll realize that they had someone rare, someone who saw them in ways nobody else ever did, and then they'll feel the loss. Not just of you, but of the version of themselves they could only access when they were with you. And at night, when everything slows down and there's no one to distract them, that's when it hits hardest. They'll lie awake, replaying the memories, trying to remember the sound of your voice, the way you used to say their name, the small details they never paid attention to before. That's when the guilt creeps in, not because they meant to hurt you, but because they finally see how much they did. And it's not just about missing you, it's about realizing they never appreciated the depth of what they had. They start to see the things they used to complain about as the very things that made you extraordinary. The way you cared too much was what made you different. The way you communicated when they shut down was the bridge they never learned to cross. The way you believed in connection, in effort, in loyalty, those were qualities they'll spend years trying to find again, only to realize that nobody will ever love them quite the same way you did. And they'll date other people. They'll try to replace the feeling. At first, they might even feel a spark with someone new, a sense of relief that they've moved on. But deep down, they'll keep comparing. Every conversation will remind them of how effortlessly you understood them. Every small misunderstanding will make them think of how patient you were. Every moment of silence will echo with the ghost of your presence, and they'll start to realize that they didn't just lose a person, they lost peace. And that's the thing about losing someone genuine. The impact doesn't fade when the relationship ends. It lingers. It shows up in the smallest moments, In the song, they skip because it reminds them of you. In the cafe, they avoid because it was your favorite place. In the scent that catches them off guard and drags them back to a memory they swore they'd forgotten. It's everywhere, and it's unavoidable. But the most powerful part, it's when they see you thriving without them. When they see that the same love you poured into them, you finally started pouring into yourself. When they notice your glow, your peace, your confidence, the way you've reclaimed your power, that's when they feel the full gravity of their mistake. Because it's one thing to lose you, but it's another thing entirely to watch you become everything they once tried to dim. And they'll remember how you always encouraged them to grow, how you believed in their potential even when they didn't. And now they'll see that you've grown into the person you were always meant to be, just not with them. That realization stings more than anything else. It's the moment they understand that while they were busy testing your limits, you were learning to love yourself enough to walk away. And they'll wish they could go back. They'll wish they could say the things they never said, do the things they never did. They'll wish they had chosen you the way you once chose them. But by then, it'll be too late, because you can't unsee your worth once you've found it. You can't return to the version of yourself that accepted half love when you've tasted what it feels like to stand fully in your power. And maybe they'll reach out hoping for another chance, but something inside you will have shifted. You'll see them clearly, not through the lens of potential, but through the clarity of reality. You'll remember how hard you tried, how deeply you cared, and how much it cost you to stay. And instead of resentment, you'll feel peace, because you'll realize that sometimes losing someone isn't the punishment, it's the lesson. And your absence was the mirror they needed to finally see themselves. And that's how they feel when they realize you're gone. It's not just sadness, it's recognition. It's the moment they understand that they lost something sacred, something real. They lost the person who would have walked through fire for them, and they'll spend a long time trying to find that again. But by then, you'll be long gone, not out of bitterness, but out of growth. Because when you finally learn that walking away isn't weakness but wisdom, you stop chasing those who only see your worth when it's too late. And as they sit with that realization, the silence grows heavier. It's in that silence where truth finally speaks to them. They start to recognize all the small things you did that they never even noticed, the way you listened when they spoke, the way you sensed their moods before they even said a word, the way your presence made them feel seen in a world that so often made them feel invisible. They remember how you always understood their chaos, how you brought calm when everything around them was falling apart. And suddenly they feel that void, not because there's no one else around, but because no one else carries that same energy, that same light, that same warmth you effortlessly gave. And they'll try to distract themselves. They'll dive into work, into new hobbies, into temporary connections. They'll tell their friends they're fine, that it was for the best, that they're better off this way. But there will come moments, small fleeting moments, when the mask slips. Maybe they'll hear a song that reminds them of a drive you once took together, or see someone wearing your favorite color, or catch the scent of your perfume on a stranger walking by. And in those moments, it hits them all over again, the realization that they let go of something irreplaceable. And it's not regret in the traditional sense, it's something deeper. It's the awareness that they were loved with a rare kind of sincerity, a love that was patient when they were guarded, a love that forgave when they pushed it away, a love that tried to build bridges where others built walls. And now that love is gone, they see how empty the world feels without it, and they start to remember your laugh, not just the sound of it, but how it made them feel, like they were safe, like they were home. They'll remember how you always knew the right thing to say, not because you rehearsed it, but because you cared enough to understand what they needed. They'll recall the times you stood by them when no one else did, and they'll wonder how they ever convinced themselves that your loyalty was ordinary. And when they see you smiling again, not because of them, but despite them, that's when the ache sharpens. They'll see that your glow no longer needs their validation. They'll recognize that you've healed in ways they never imagined possible. You're no longer the person who begged for their attention. You're the person who learned that your love was never the problem. That's the hardest truth for them to swallow, realizing you were never asking for too much. They were simply giving too little. And there's a deep sting that comes when someone realizes that the person they underestimated became the one that got away. It's not about revenge or pride, it's about awareness. Because now they finally see what you saw in them all along. They see their own potential reflected in your absence, and it hurts. You became the mirror they refused to look into, and now that you're gone, they can't avoid their reflection anymore. And they'll replay every argument in their head, not to justify themselves, but to understand where they went wrong. They'll remember the look in your eyes when you tried to explain how their indifference made you feel small. They'll recall the disappointment in your voice when you realized they weren't willing to meet you halfway. And as they relive those moments, something inside them shifts. They start to wish they had listened more, cared more, tried more. They start to understand that love doesn't die because of big betrayals. It dies from 1,000 small neglects. And they'll try to tell themselves that maybe it just wasn't meant to be. But deep down, they'll know it could have been, if only they had valued you when they had the chance. That's what keeps them awake at night. Not the loss itself, but the realization that the loss was preventable. They had the power to nurture what you gave, but they chose ego instead of effort, comfort instead of growth. And as you continue moving forward, they'll watch from a distance, silently wishing they could be part of the new world you've built. They'll see how much stronger, wiser, and more peaceful you've become. You'll see that you've turned your pain into power, your heartbreak into healing, and your silence into strength. And that's when they'll truly feel the weight of your absence. Not because they want to control you again, but because they finally understand what they lost when they lost you. And they'll remember the promises they made but never kept, the future you once talked about that they let slip away. They'll think about how you used to dream together and now those dreams no longer include them. They'll imagine what it would be like if they could go back and do it all differently, if they could love you the way you deserved from the beginning. But time doesn't rewind for those who only realize your worth after you're gone. It's a one-way lesson, a painful one, but necessary. And then while they're stuck in the loop of regret, you'll be learning to trust again, not in them, but in yourself. You'll start to see that leaving wasn't an act of loss. It was an act of love. Love for yourself. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from what's comfortable and familiar, to honor your own heart enough to let go of what doesn't honor it back. And they'll think about the moments they made you question your own worth. And that thought will cut deep, because now they see that you were the kind of person who gave without expecting, who stayed loyal when it wasn't convenient, who loved them in their brokenness. And they realize that no matter who comes next, they'll always compare. Because when you've been loved by someone with depth, surface level affection never feels the same. And they'll crave the connection you once had, but it will be gone. Because what they don't understand is that once a heart breaks and rebuilds itself, it doesn't reopen to the same door it closed. You've outgrown the version of love that made you shrink. You've stepped into a higher version of yourself, one that no longer settles for almost. And they'll reach out maybe with a text, maybe with a call, maybe just a social media post meant to test the waters. But what they won't realize is that while they were trying to replace you, you were evolving. You were healing, learning, unlearning, and finding peace in your solitude. You stopped waiting for an apology that would never come. You stopped chasing explanations that wouldn't change anything. You stopped needing closure from someone who couldn't even give you consistency. And that's when they'll truly feel the depth of your absence, because they'll see that you've become someone they can't access anymore. The door they once kept half open for convenience is now closed, and not out of anger, but out of self-respect. They'll watch you shine from afar and realize that while they were busy playing games, you were building a new life, one that doesn't revolve around being understood by them, but around being understood by yourself. And then the irony is, the moment they finally understand you is the moment you no longer need them to. They'll understand why you cried, why you begged for communication, why you needed reassurance. They'll understand the depth of your love and the pain of your disappointment. They'll finally see that all you ever wanted was for them to meet you halfway, and that your leaving wasn't punishment, it was protection. And when someone realizes too late that you were the real thing, it creates a kind of ache that lingers because they can't undo it. They can't go back to the version of you that waited, that hoped, that believed they'd change. That version no longer exists. The love they once had is now a memory, and the person they once knew has evolved beyond their reach. And in that realization, they finally learn what it means to lose something real. Because the truth is, when you left, you didn't just walk away. You took the light you brought into their life with you, and the darkness too. That follows isn't about you being gone. It's about them finally seeing what they refused to see when you were still there. And when they see you again, whether it's in person, online, or through a mutual friend, they'll feel that rush of emotion hit them like a wave. They'll notice how your energy has changed. You're calmer, lighter, more centered. You've reclaimed yourself in a way that they never thought you could without them, and it will confuse them because they once thought you needed them to feel whole. Now they see that you've built wholeness on your own, and that realization breaks them in ways they can't express. And they'll think about reaching out, telling you how much they've grown, how they finally understand what they put you through. But they'll hesitate because they'll sense that the version of you who once waited for that message doesn't exist anymore. They'll scroll through your photos, notice the way your smile reaches your eyes now, and realize that they no longer have a place in your story. They'll understand that your healing didn't require their apology. It required your decision to stop letting their absence define your peace. And yet, despite all of that, a part of them will always hope for a second chance, not because they think they can do better, but because they can't stand the idea that someone else gets to experience the love they once took for granted. The thought of another person being on the receiving end of your affection, your laughter, your presence, it will burn. Because they'll know deep down that no one will ever experience you the way they did when you loved them freely, before you learnt to guard your heart. And they'll replay the last moments over and over, wondering if they could have stopped you from walking away. They'll think of all the chances they had to choose you and didn't. The conversations they avoided, the apologies they withheld, the moments they let pride win over love. And that's when they'll understand that indifference was never strength, it was fear. Fear of vulnerability, fear of being seen, fear of loving someone who made them confront their own reflection. But now that reflection stares back at them every day, reminding them of what they lost through their silence. And time will pass and life will move on, but the memory of you will linger. You'll become the quiet lesson in their heart, the reminder that love isn't infinite if it's taken for granted. They'll carry that awareness with them into every future relationship. They'll be more attentive, more expressive, more careful. They'll try to love someone new with the lessons they learned too late with you. And maybe in those moments of trying, they'll whisper your name in their mind, silently thanking you for the pain that woke them up. But even as they grow, a part of them will always wonder who they could have been if they had loved you right. Because you weren't just someone they dated, you were someone who changed them. You showed them what intimacy really meant, what effort felt like, what it meant to show up even when it wasn't easy. And that kind of influence doesn't fade, it lives on. It becomes the voice in their head telling them to do better next time, to show up fully, to never take love for granted again. And maybe that's your legacy in their life. You became the moment of clarity that arrived too late. The standard they'll compare everyone to, the one who taught them that love is not about possession but appreciation. You didn't just leave, you left an imprint. You became the measure of what real love looks like. And they'll look back one day and realize that losing you was their wake-up call, that the love they thought they could live without was the very love that could have made them whole. They'll wish they had learned sooner that love isn't found in grand gestures, but in the small, everyday acts of showing up. They'll wish they had told you how much you mattered before it was too late. But by then, you'll be long past waiting for that realization. And when they see you again, whether it's in person, online, or through a mutual friend, they'll feel that rush of emotion hit them like a wave. They'll notice how your energy has changed. You're calmer, lighter, more centered. You've reclaimed yourself in a way that they never thought you could without them, and it will confuse them because they once thought you needed them to feel whole. Now they see that you've built wholeness on your own, and that realization breaks them in ways they can't express. And they'll think about reaching out, telling you how much they've grown, how they finally understand what they put you through. But they'll hesitate because they'll sense that the version of you who once waited for that message doesn't exist anymore. They'll scroll through your photos, notice the way your smile reaches your eyes now, and realize that they no longer have a place in your story. They'll understand that your healing didn't require their apology. It required your decision to stop letting their absence define your peace. And yet, despite all of that, a part of them will always hope for a second chance, not because they think they can do better, but because they can't stand the idea that someone else gets to experience the love they once took for granted. The thought of another person being on the receiving end of your affection, your laughter, your presence, it will burn. Because they'll know deep down that no one will ever experience you the way they did when you loved them freely, before you learnt to guard your heart. And they'll replay the last moments over and over, wondering if they could have stopped you from walking away. They'll think of all the chances they had to choose you and didn't. The conversations they avoided, the apologies they withheld, the moments they let pride win over love. And that's when they'll understand that indifference was never strength, it was fear. Fear of vulnerability, fear of being seen, fear of loving someone who made them confront their own reflection. But now that reflection stares back at them every day, reminding them of what they lost through their silence. And time will pass and life will move on, but the memory of you will linger. You'll become the quiet lesson in their heart, the reminder that love isn't infinite if it's taken for granted. They'll carry that awareness with them into every future relationship. They'll be more attentive, more expressive, more careful. They'll try to love someone new with the lessons they learned too late with you. And maybe in those moments of trying, they'll whisper your name in their mind, silently thanking you for the pain that woke them up. But even as they grow, a part of them will always wonder who they could have been if they had loved you right. Because you weren't just someone they dated, you were someone who changed them. You showed them what intimacy really meant, what effort felt like, what it meant to show up even when it wasn't easy. And that kind of influence doesn't fade, it lives on. It becomes the voice in their head telling them to do better next time, to show up fully, to never take love for granted again. And maybe that's your legacy in their life. You became the moment of clarity that arrived too late. The standard they'll compare everyone to, the one who taught them that love is not about possession but appreciation. You didn't just leave, you left an imprint. You became the measure of what real love looks like. And they'll look back one day and realize that losing you was their wake-up call, that the love they thought they could live without was the very love that could have made them whole. They'll wish they had learnt sooner that love isn't found in grand gestures, but in the small, everyday acts of showing up. They'll wish they had told you how much you mattered before it was too late. But by then, you'll be long past waiting for that realization. You'll have built a life filled with peace, surrounded by people who understand your worth without needing to lose you first. You'll have learned that the pain of letting go is temporary, but the power that comes from choosing yourself lasts forever. And as they continue to live with the echo of what could have been, you'll keep walking forward, grateful not for what ended, but for what it taught you about never settling for half-hearted love again. And as you keep walking forward, they remain caught somewhere between the past and the present, trapped in the space between who they were with you and who they've become without you. They'll see moments of their life moving on, people coming and going, laughter that almost feels real, but deep down, a part of them will always feel unfinished. Because you weren't just another chapter, they were supposed to grow with you, and now that story will forever be left incomplete. They'll carry that quiet ache, the unspoken realization that what you shared wasn't something that can ever be replicated. It wasn't just about love, it was about alignment, timing, and the rare kind of emotional depth that most people spend a lifetime searching for. And they'll hear others talk about soul connections and think, I had that once. They'll remember how effortless it felt to be around you, how even silence between you was comfortable. They'll remember the small details, the way you looked at them when you were lost in thought, the sound of your voice when you were calm, the way your presence alone could make chaos feel manageable. They'll remember how your love didn't demand perfection, only honesty. You didn't ask them to be flawless, you only asked them to be real. But they chose fear over truth, and now they live with that choice every single day. And there will be moments when they try to convince themselves they've moved on. They'll tell themselves that everything happens for a reason, that what's meant for them won't miss them. But then something small, a random quote, a memory, a familiar scent, will bring your image flooding back, and suddenly all that rationalizing crumbles. They'll remember how you used to look at them when they weren't paying attention, how you used to make ordinary days feel meaningful. They'll feel it all over again, the connection, the loss, the realization that no one has ever seen them the way you did. And they'll go through phases of trying to replace you. Maybe they'll meet someone who seems exciting, someone who checks the boxes on paper. But no matter how hard they try, something will always be missing. Because what you gave wasn't just attention, it was understanding. It was the kind of love that went beyond compatibility. It was emotional safety, trust, vulnerability, and genuine care. And when they sit across from someone new, pretending to feel something similar, they'll know deep down that it's not the same. You can't recreate authenticity. You can't imitate soul-level connection. And eventually they'll realize that they didn't just lose a person, they lost a mirror. You reflected back to them the parts of themselves they were too scared to face. You showed them what it looked like to love fearlessly, to communicate openly, to give without keeping score. And when they pushed you away, what they were really avoiding was themselves. They'll realize that what made them uncomfortable wasn't your love. It was the way your love held them accountable for their own growth. And that realization will follow them quietly long after the world believes they've forgotten you. And they'll think about how easily they dismissed your kindness, how they mistook your compassion for naivety, your patience for weakness. They'll finally understand that strength isn't about staying guarded. It's about showing up with an open heart, even after being hurt. You did that for them. You showed up even when it cost you peace. You kept believing in their potential long after they stopped earning it. And now they'll see that what they called too emotional was really courage in its purest form, the willingness to love deeply in a world that fears depth. And as life goes on, they'll start noticing how they've become more cautious with others. They'll hesitate before opening up, afraid of being hurt again, but also haunted by the memory of how it felt when someone loved them without hesitation. They'll try to mimic that openness, that empathy, but it won't feel the same because your love wasn't performative, it was instinctive. It wasn't based on what they could give you, but on who they were when they were with you. And that's what they'll miss most, the version of themselves that existed only in your presence. And they'll start to realize that they lost not only the person who loved them, but also the version of themselves that you helped them access. You made them braver, softer, more alive. And without you, they'll feel that absence like a shadow that never quite fades. They'll see glimpses of who they used to be when they were loved by you, and it'll make them ache, not just for you, but for the person they were when love felt safe. And they'll watch you grow from afar, perhaps through mutual friends or the quiet scroll of a social feed. They'll see your light shining brighter, your confidence stronger, your energy grounded. And even if they never say it out loud, they'll feel pride mixed with pain. Pride that you became who you were meant to be. Pain that they no longer get to be part of that story. They'll remember when you used to dream out loud about the future and how they once saw themselves in those dreams. Now, they'll watch you live them without them, and it'll hit them in waves. The understanding that they could have been part of something extraordinary, but they chose comfort over courage. And there will come a point when they'll try to reach out, not always with words, but through gestures, maybe a song shared, a subtle like, a vague message, something to test if the door is still open. But when they do, they'll sense the change in you. You'll respond with warmth, but not attachment, kindness, but not invitation. You've learnt to love from a place of abundance, not longing. And that's what will finally break them, not your distance, but your peace, because peace is power. And they'll realize that they can no longer reach you the way they used to, not because you hate them, but because you've healed. And they'll wonder what it would feel like to be in your presence again, to laugh with you, to talk for hours like nothing ever changed. But even if the opportunity arises, they'll sense that the dynamic has shifted. You're not bitter, you're wiser. You're not closed off, you're selective. You're no longer searching for validation, you've become it. And while they may smile and pretend to be fine, inside, they'll feel the distance of 1,000 unspoken truths. And in time, they'll see you in someone else's arms, someone who understands what they couldn't. And that will be the moment their heart truly breaks. Because it's one thing to lose someone, but another to see them finally receive the love they deserved all along. They'll recognize the tenderness in your eyes when you look at someone new, the calmness in your smile, the authenticity in your laughter. And they'll realize that what they once had the privilege of holding is now being cherished by someone else who doesn't take it for granted. And they'll think back to the time when your heart was still reachable, when all it would have taken was effort, honesty, and vulnerability to keep you. They'll remember all the times they stayed silent when you needed reassurance, all the times they acted detached instead of saying, "I love you too." And now those moments will replay endlessly in their mind, not as nostalgia, but as reminders of everything they let slip through their fingers. And in the quietest moments of their life, when the world is asleep and the weight of pretense has faded, they'll whisper your name, not out of hope, but out of longing. Because there will always be a part of them that wonders how differently life could have turned out if they had chosen you when you were still choosing them. And they'll keep going, of course. They'll live, they'll laugh, they'll work, they'll grow. But every so often, in between the noise of their routine, they'll feel that empty space, the space you used to fill so effortlessly. It'll remind them that not all losses are loud. Some are quiet, steady, and eternal, the kind that doesn't destroy you in one moment, but slowly follows you through life as a soft ache beneath the surface. And while they may never admit it, deep down they'll know losing you was the moment everything changed. Not just because of what you brought to their life, but because of what you took with you when you left. The comfort of being truly understood. They'll spend years trying to fill that space, only to learn that some people don't get replaced, they get remembered. And that memory will follow them like a shadow, not to torment them, but to remind them that once they were loved by something real, something pure, something they'll never experience quite the same way again,